So I'm calling to order this meeting of the House Committee on Children, Families, Finance, and Policy. Welcome all. So glad to be with you all on Budget Bill Week. I'm going to start off as usual by having the clerk take the roll. I know we've got a few folks who are running a little bit late, but no problem. Ms. Khan?
Chair Pinto,
Present.
Vice Chair Keeler,
Present.
Lee Daniels,
Present.
Representative Bliss,
Present.
Representative Coulter,
Present.
Representative Davis, Representative Hansen, Representative Hemmington-Yeager,
Present.
Representative Hicks,
Present.
Representative Hudson, Representative Katiza-Watun, Representative Lee,
Present.
Representative Nelson,
Present.
Representative Perez Vega, Representative Zalesnikar.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. I know that Representative Davis has come in, and I know the other folks, as I say, were running late, so no problem. So let's get the minutes approved if we can. So Vice Chair Keeler, if you'll move approval of the minutes from March 23rd.
So moved.
Thank you. So members, any discussion, additions, corrections to the minutes from March 23rd? I said that. All in favor of approval of the minutes from March 23rd, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so those minutes are adopted. The motion is approved. So members, just a quick orientation to the week before we get to the business for today. So what's going to happen is that we're going to bring up the bill that is going to serve as the vehicle for our committee's budget bill. We're then going to adopt the author's amendment, the DE1, to turn it into the committee's budget bill. We're then going to have House Research and nonpartisan staff have nonpartisan staff walk us through the fiscal and substantive and policy components of the proposal, including any clarifying questions. And I asked that we're really not going to have a debate or discussion. It's not really about the why, but just about the what. What is actually in this bill? Then tomorrow we'll receive testimony from members of the public, and members of the public, and I'll try to repeat this at the end, that hearing will be in Capitol 120, which is a hearing room that allows for remote testimony. So if you're interested in testifying, you'll want to contact the committee administrator, Coley Colburn, by 5 p.m. tomorrow, and her email address is on our website and at various places, and in the agenda today too. And then finally on Thursday we'll mark up the bill, meaning that amendments will be offered. I do expect to have an author's amendment because already as soon as this is being finalized, they're already thinking about things to address. We'll consider any member amendments, and then we'll vote this out to the Committee on Ways and Means. Are there questions about the process? I'm going into this a little bit of detail because we have more first-termers in this committee than some others, and several second-termers too, and I know that it's an unusual process. So any questions? Not seeing any. Okay, so then we're going to get to the business of the day, and so I'm going to ask Vice Chair Keeler, if she will, to move House File 238 to bring that before us.
I move House File 238 before the committee.
Thank you. And then if you could move the DE1 amendment.
I move the DE1.
Okay, and so members, the DE1 again is the amendment that converts 238 into our committee's budget bill, and so I'd ask your approval to approve this next step in the process. And so all in favor of approval of the motion for the DE1 amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you for the motion, Vice Chair Keeler, and thanks all for the support. So, members, the DE1 amendment you've got before you in these spreadsheets. Just a really quick comment. The committee, the budget targets that were agreed to by House and Senate leadership and by the governor provided the committee with an increase of $300 million to spend on the early learning side of our ledger and $875 million to spend on the HHS side, and that's in the coming biennium. And so we're going to walk through the details of it, but just the comment that in a number of areas we are making transformational change in response to some really significant needs that we've heard about in the committee. In particular, a couple of the areas that are of particular focus, child care and early learning and homelessness, but also substantial investments in the area of child protection and just system reform in several places as well, as we'll get into. We heard throughout our work about the needs in these areas and also about the massive benefits of making sure that we're addressing those needs. And so I'm really proud of the proposal before you. And again, we're going to have more time to discuss this in the next couple days. And I think more time to kind of get at the why as to why we're putting this together. So I'm going to ask, since we're really focused on the what, I'm going to ask Ms. Beckel to lead us first. So we're going to do the fiscal components first, and then get into the bill as a whole. So Ms. Beckel, if you can start off walking us through the early education spreadsheet. And members, this is going to be the one that says 2023 House Early Education, Children and Families. Members of the public, this is posted online. And Solveig Beckel from House Fiscal, please take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Solveig Beckel, House Fiscal. So this spreadsheet, let's see, the spreadsheet shows the February forecast in columns A, B, and C. Then it shows the governor's recommended changes for fiscal years 24 and 25 and fiscal years 26 and 27 in columns D through G. And then it shows the House File 238 DE1 in columns H through O. So, Mr. Chair, would you like me to go through the base or just the change items?
Why don't you go through the just the change items, I think, and folks can review the base, can review the base separately, and we can certainly take questions on that. But let's just do the change items. Thank you.
Okay, just for reference, when I refer to base items, those are items that have a 0 in the change columns. Those change columns for the House are columns K and O. So if it has a 0 in the column, that means that it's just already built into the early education, children and families base. So on line 3, breakfast aid for early childhood special education students. This is an item related to early education, but funded through the K through 12 Education Finance Committee. So line 5 is the first increase in House File 238 DE1. That is the developmental screening aid increase. In the first biennium, it receives an increase of $1.951 million. In the second biennium, an increase of $2.025 million. On line 8 is the early childhood family education formula allowance increase and indexation to inflation. This item receives an increase of $5.517 million in the first biennium and $10.728 million in the second biennium. Line 9, ECFE support staff. This item receives an increase of $1 million in the first biennium and $1 million in the second biennium.
And Ms. Beckel, I don't know that we need you to read the numbers in the columns, but yeah, but identifying sort of what the items, identifying the items would be great.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Okay. The next change item is the early education curriculum grant on line 10, which is a transfer to the Office of Higher Education. Line 11, early education teacher licensure requirement, which is to Pelsby, whereas the majority of these items are to MDE. Line 13, an appropriation to the early childhood teacher shortage program. Line 16, the early learning scholarships increase. Line 19 is another early education item that is funded through K through 12. Line 20, grow your own early educators, which is transferred to the Special Revenue Fund. Line 22, Head Start infrastructure. Line 25, the base remains the same, but then there are changes in the tails. Line 26, learning with music, early childhood educators. Line 28, the parent-child program receives an increase. Line 30, the Reach Out and Read Minnesota program. And then lines 32 through 45 shows the voluntary pre-kindergarten changes that are tracked in the K through 12 education finance budget, but are related to early education. So I just thought I'd show those in brackets here. And then line 45 shows the appropriation for Way to Grow. Then the items below this just show the impacts to the early education special revenue fund.
Thank you so much. And I should have noted before that the pulling all this together is, of course, a massive amount of work, and many thanks to all the staff, but then especially to our nonpartisan staff. Yes, I mean, so Ms. Beckel has been working really hard for us, but also on the K-12 education finance side, and then Ms. Sunderman and Pinelli and Ms. Mock and to Doug Berg as well. The five of you have done incredible work. I'm so grateful. Are there member questions regarding the spreadsheet that we just walked through, first of all? I know folks are digesting it. This one came fairly late yesterday evening because of some challenges in working things through on the education finance side, but we'll have some time. So, okay. I'm thinking then why don't we go through the HHS side, Mr. Berg, if you're willing, and then we'll go through the bill through the three House Research folks. Thanks so much again, Ms. Beckel. And so members, we're now flipping to the other spreadsheet that you have. Children, Families, Human Services is what it says in the upper left-hand corner. Somewhat different format, but still governor's recommendations on the left and House, and what's in this bill is on the right in the shaded area. And Mr. Berg, whenever you're ready.
Mr. Chairman, members, yes, you should have the spreadsheet that's labeled Children and Families HHS, House File 238DE at the top, and has 8:03 a.m. on the 27th in the lower right corner. As the chair said, the gray columns are the House columns, the unshaded columns are the governor's space for change items. On line 6, you'll see in the fourth from the right column, and in the right-hand column, you'll see the spending in this net new spending of $875 million of general fund. There is some TANF spending in here as well, but it's almost entirely general fund here. And moving to the specific items, they begin on line 115 on page 2. We are doing the governor's recommendation for the 75th percentile of child care max rates. Looking at line 127, this is the governor's item for funding for licensing activities. The House bill, the DE amendment, covers that, but at a slightly different level. Moving on to page 3. The next several sections, there are governor's recommendations, but these also relate to House File 444, the Pathway Home Act that passed earlier in the session in the House, but not in the Senate. So line 139 is funding for the Emergency Services Program. The governor had a recommendation on that. The House is slightly above that in the first year. On line 145 is transitional housing. This bill has the same recommendation as the governor on that. The line 151 is additional funding for the Homeless Youth Act. The House has somewhat higher funding than the governor does, as you'll see. On line 157 is additional funding for the Safe Harbor program, which is also funded at above the governor's recommendation. On line 163 is an item that was in House File 444, but which is not a governor's rec, which is emergency shelter grants. On line 169, there is the administration of the various homeless grants, the ones I just mentioned, which is at the same level as the governor's. Going on to page 4. On line 175, the House, it's a House-only position to increase the homeless, or to do, excuse me, it's House File 2008, which is a homeless youth pilot project. On line 181 is House File 1672, the Quality Parenting Initiative. On line 185 is a part of House File 2471, which is the child care cost estimation model study. Line 189 is House File 2106, which has to do with childcare staffing rules. And I see there's actually some missing line numbers. The Parent Aware Program, there's some additional funding for that. The governor's, the next item you see on line 193 is in federal funding, which is permanent reprioritization, which the House governor recommended and the House does. On line 201 is House File 1698, the Family, Friends, and Neighbor Program. That's a House-only item. On line on line 2207 is House File 2665, Representative Hicks Diaper Distribution Program. Moving to page 5, on line 212 is the governor's recommendation for Child Care Assistance Program provider retention payments, but the House has a different, somewhat lower number. On line 218 is the governor's stabilization payments at the same level. The House does not do a governor's item on line 222, the workforce development and scholarship item. On line 231 is the child care support grant programs, which the House does at a slightly lower level than the governor. One grant item was taken out. On line 240 is the administration for those various child care changes. Moving on to page 6, the House does not do on line 248. This will take just a bit of explaining. The governor did several things related to MFIP. One was the 6-month eligibility and current income, and so in this case we've zeroed out the governor's number, but right below it you'll see House File 466, which is Representative Noor's bill that does all the parts of the governor's MFIP change, the 6-month eligibility and current income, and the sanction reform piece we'll see lower in the spreadsheet for the governor, plus it does the repeal of the DWP program. And so that is all here on line 258 in the House items. Moving to line 269 is the governor's recommendation on the Family First Prevention Services Act. That is similar to the governor's, but one of the grant items was reduced on line 275, I believe, yes, 275. Moving on to page 7, line 264 is governor's recommendation on funding for the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe to join the American Indian Child Welfare Initiative to become an initiative tribe. On line 290, there's additional funding for the existing initiative tribes that the House does, a governor's rec that the House does. On line 296 is some new staffing for non-initiative tribes. On line 303, there is a governor's recommendation that the DE does to promote food security among tribal nations. Moving on to page 8, on line 310, there is a governor's recommendation that the House takes on the additional funding for the Minnesota Food Shelf Program. On line 316, the governor had a recommendation for capital projects related to food shelves and tribal nation food programs. The House does that, but at a lower level than the governor's recommendation. On line 322, the House is not doing the SNAP outreach and application assistance item that the governor recommended. On line 328 is the administrative funding the governor recommended for the various food proposals. On line 334, which should have a bill number, is Representative Ryer's bill to add some money to the Community Action Program. That was not a governor's recommendation. On line 339 this is the start of the governor's foster care and after foster care enhancements. The first one is the support after foster care in the community, which the House has in at the same level as the governor. On the last line on that page, on 343, is the support after foster care to establish the Beyond 21 program, which the House has in at the governor's recommendation. On page 9, on line 347, the House is not doing the support after foster care minor connect program. On line 353 is the governor's recommendation, which the House has in for the county grants to reduce caseloads. On line 359, the House is not doing the additional funding for public-private adoption initiative. On line 365 is the additional staffing related to the foster care initiatives. On line 371 is the governor's recommendation, which the House picks up for the plan for use of SSI or RSDI funding. On line 376 is House File 1661, which is part of Representative Hicks' additional kinship assistance item. On line 380 is the House picks up the recommendation of the governor on the new non-caregiver sex trafficking response path. On line, page 10, on line 384, the House is not doing the governor's recommendation on additional funding for contracted employment and income verification service. That's a contract item. On line 388 is the modifications to foster care and relative caregivers, commonly referred to as the family definition, which the House picks up at the governor's recommendation. Line 397 is the FAME program, which is in at the governor's recommendation. Line 403, is an item related to child support federal compliance, where the House has picked up the governor's recommendation. On line 412 is the governor's recommendation for modifications to CCAP provider registration. On page 11, beginning on line 417, is a governor's recommendation on background study modifications for legal non-licensed child care, which is picked up in the DE. On line 422 is also another part of a centralized provider registration. This is, I believe, not for legal non-licensed. The House picks up the governor's recommendation on that. On line 426 is the governor's major information technology item that does a whole variety of fixes to technology programs related to child care. That's in at the governor's recommendation. The last line on that page, line 449, is the governor's recommendation for a network of community resource centers. However, the House has done that at a lower level than the governor's recommendation. On page 12, beginning on line 464, is the DE picks up the governor's recommendation for additional staffing for the American Indian Wellbeing Unit. On line 469, the DE picks up the governor's recommendation on additional funding for Indian child welfare grants. On 473 is an item for implementing continuous licensing process for family child care providers, which was both the governor's rec and in the DE. On line 478 is the governor's recommendation on strengthening the financial fraud and abuse investigations program and program integrity. That is picked up at the governor's level. On page 13, there is on line 488 is the DHS portion of the governor's recommendation for the new Department of Children, Families, and Learning, or Children, Youth, and Families. On line 493 is the governor's item relative to MFIP sanctions. I mentioned before, we have a comprehensive item earlier in the sheet that does the sanctions, the 6-month budgeting, the current income, and repeals the DWP program. So here we've zeroed out the governor's sanctions item. On line 504 is the governor's recommendation for a COLA on the MFIP housing benefit item, which is taken in the DE. And then that's the end of DHS. There is one item at the Health Department on line 523, which is Safe Harbor Regional Navigators. That was not a governor's recommendation. And then on line 831 is an item that appropriates $25 million to Minnesota IT for childcare-related IT projects. On line 836 is the funding directly to the new Department of Children, Youth, and Families, which is a governor's recommendation. And then on the final page, there is on line 841 the new funding for the ombudsperson for families. Then on 844 is the new funding for the ombudsperson for American Indian families. And on 850 is additional funding for the ombudsperson for foster care youth. And finally, there is on line 872 at Minnesota Management and Budget, the bulk of the funding for the transition to a new Department of Children, Youth, and Families.
Mr. Berg, thank you for that walkthrough and especially for your incredible work in putting this together. You've been a lifesaver for me repeatedly. Members, are there any questions regarding the HHS spreadsheet? So not seeing any. So in that case, we're going to move to a walkthrough of the bill from our amazing nonpartisan staff, House Research staff. I'm not sure. I'm assuming Ms. Mock is going to be going first. And so, members, we're just going to walk through starting at Article 1. And Ms. Mock, please take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Annie Mock with House Research. Members, in your packet, you have a document that's labeled in the top right, House File 238, and there's the reference to the DE1, and it says list of bills included. This is sort of the stand-in for the standard bill summary, and this is what we're going to go through today. So starting with Article 1, which is titled Childcare, most of the provisions in this article are related to the Child Care Assistance Program, or CCAP. So sections 1 through 3 are all part of a governor's proposal that changed definitions to include relative custodians, successor custodians or guardians, and foster parents in the CCAP program. Section 4 is the first of several provisions that are related to a governor's proposal that's referred to as administrative improvements for child care providers. I'm not going to go through each of these, but all of these proposals in this bucket either relate to centralizing child care provider registration functions within DHS or aligning or fixing a conflict in statute that will allow legal non-licensed providers to have background studies every 5 years instead of every 2 years. So Section 5 was in House File 13 that passed the House. This permanently reprioritizes the basic sliding fee waiting list. So then Sections 6 through 13 are all related to that administrative improvements proposal that I mentioned from the governor. So skipping to Section 14, which is on line 9.4. This was also in House File 13 as it passed the House. This increases the CCAP rates up to the 75th percentile of the most recent child care market survey. Section 15 was also in House File 13, and it clarifies that CCAP providers may provide financial assistance in the form of like scholarships or discounts to any of clients. Section 16 is related to the administrative improvements proposal. Section 17 on line 13.5 is another governor's proposal that modifies when a CCAP provider may request a fair hearing. And this is actually related to a new program integrity language that I'll talk about in Article 4. So then 18 through 21 are all related to the administrative improvements proposal. Section 22, which is on line 15.26, was in House File 2330. And this is a governor's proposal that allows a CCAP provider to ask DHS to reconsider the contents of a correction order that the provider alleges to be in error. Section 23 was in House File 2910. This is a governor's proposal to directing the child care resource and referral agencies to establish a one-stop regional assistance network for child care providers. Section 24 was in House File 1698. This establishes a family friend and neighbor program. Section 25 was in the governor's proposal. This is the child care retention payments, so similar to the child care stabilization payments that are currently in effect. These are retention payments that would go into effect after the stabilization payments are over. Section 26, also a governor's proposal to give grants to organizations to create shared services alliances for family child care providers. Section 27, another governor's proposal to provide technology grants to child care providers. Sections 28 through 31 are all related to the administrative improvements proposal. So we'll move to Section 32, which is on line 29.1. And this is actually just a technical change, again, related to that program integrity language that I'll talk about in Article 4. So then Sections 33 through 34, also all related to that administrative improvements proposal. Section 35, which is on line 31.12. This is the governor's proposal to establish transition grants. So these grants would be in effect, so the stabilization grants that are currently in effect end at the end of June. Then the transition grants would go into effect for providers before the retention payments could start. And then sections 36 and 37 are both in the governor's proposal, and they both reallocate or direct DHS to reallocate basic sliding fee money to account for both the CCAP rate increase and the change to the family definition for CCAP. And then section 38, also in the governor's proposal, it just repeals language that's made obsolete by the other provisions in the article. And with
Thank
that,
you.
I'll hand it over to Ms. Sunderman.
Thank you, Ms. Mock. Ms. Sunderman.
Mr. Chair and members, Sarah Sunderman from House Research. I'll be doing an overview of Articles 2 and 3 today. Article 2, starting on page 32, is child safety and permanency. Sections 1 and 13 are governor's proposals related to independent living skills for foster youth beyond 21. These are grants to local social services agencies, tribes, and other organizations. Sections 2 and 12, also governor's proposals. These are for the Support Beyond 21 grant program, which is services and financial support for youth in extended foster care. Section 3 is from House File 1521. This was a DHS technical policy bill. These adjust some effective dates for North Star Care for Children assessment rates. Section 4 is a governor's proposal related to Family First Prevention Services Act implementation. This section is for prevention and early intervention allocations for counties and tribes. Sections 5, 7, and then 16 through 29. These are from the governor's proposal. These add the non-caregiver sex trafficking assessment to the types of responses a local agency has in child welfare cases. Section 6, this is also a governor's proposal. This is a provision for child welfare staffing allocation for non-initiative tribes. Sections 8 and 10 are also from House File 1521, a DHS policy bill. They just update cross-references. Section 9 is the governor's proposal for establishing community resource centers to support caregivers and families. Section 11 is the governor's proposal. This is for transition planning for youth discharged from foster care at age 21. Section 14 is also a governor's proposal. This is related to the Family First Prevention Services Act implementation. And this establishes a review process for completed assessments by a qualified individual related to placement of a child in a qualified residential treatment program. Section 15 is from House File 1820. This makes changes to the Office of Foster Youth Ombudsperson service and removal provisions. Section 30 is a governor's proposal. This is the commissioner developing a plan to preserve federal cash assistance benefits for youth in foster care.
And Ms. Under, I'm just going to remind folks the sections that you just jumped over, you'd referenced before from the non-caregiver sex trafficking assessment. Pat?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Yes, there's a large chunk of sections, sections 16 to 29.
Got it. Thank you.
And finally, Section 31 is from House File 1479. This is the Child Protection Information Technology System Review and Recommendations. And that concludes Article 2.
Please continue to Article 3.
Okay, Article 3 covers child support changes. This starts on page 57 of the DE. Section 1 is a governor's proposal. This allows Social Security or veterans benefits to be used to satisfy child support arrears in specified circumstances. Section 2, also a governor's proposal. This makes it so that a parent who's eligible for general assistance or supplemental Social Security income is not considered voluntarily unemployed or underemployed for purposes of child support. Section 3, also a governor's proposal. This adds MFIP to the exemption from imputation of parental income. Sections 4 and 6, those are also governor's proposals. They modify how Social Security or veterans benefits are handled in the context of child support. Section 5, it modifies medical support provisions in various ways, and one main way is that it includes public health care coverage when discussing healthcare costs. Section 7 is also a governor's proposal. It adds an exception to the ability to pay if a parent receives a general assistance grant, TANF, or MFIP benefits. Section 8 is from House File 1521, the DHS policy bill. It removes 2 deviation factors in child support modifications. Section 9, starting on page 79, is a lengthy and somewhat complicated section that modifies driver's license suspensions for child support enforcement. It makes the suspensions discretionary rather than mandatory and lists circumstances and factors for the court to consider when making the decision on suspending a driver's license for non-payment of child support. Section 10, also a governor's proposal. This inserts a reference to a federal regulation and then deletes the expiration for the child support guidelines review. And finally, Section 11, also from House File 1521, the DHS policy bill, just repeals an obsolete section related to notice of interest on child support arrears, which as of, I believe, August 1st, 2022, the state no longer collects.
Thank you, Ms. Sunderman. And I should have, after each article, just have seen if, members feel free, of course, to flag us down if you've got a clarifying question. So are there any for the first 3 articles at all? I know there's certainly a lot we're going through. So, okay. So with that, Ms. Pinelli, I think, is up next, perhaps? Oh, no, Ms. Mock. So Ms. Mock, please take it away with Article 4.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm going to do Article 4, licensing. So Section 1 has the program integrity language that I mentioned earlier. So this language was proposed by the governor. It was included in House File 13 as it passed off the floor. And it modifies the actions DHS may take after receiving information regarding ongoing notifications, suspected fraud, and disqualifications by another state or federal agency. Section 2 is from House File 2330. This is a governor's proposal that allows for continuous licenses for family child care providers. Section 3 is the first of a series of proposals related to, from the governor, modifying requirements governing sleep practices for child care providers, and also allows for a cultural accommodation for the use of cradle boards, which you'll see in this section is defined. Section 4 is from House File 2106. This expands the definition of experience for use to determine an individual's qualifications for employment in a licensed child care center. Section 5 is from House File 874. So this allows, in combination with the other two provisions or sections listed there, allows Head Start programs that serve only 3 to 5-year-olds to be exempt from licensure and requires them to be certified in order to accept CCAP. Section 6 is a technical change. Section 7 comes from House File 2900. This is the governor's proposal that modifies the circumstances under which the commissioner cannot issue a license or may revoke a license under Chapter 245A, which is the DHS licensing chapter. Section 8, as part of a governor's proposal to allow DHS to take specified licensing actions when an individual who is living in the household where the licensed services are provided or is otherwise subject to a background study has non-disqualifying background study information.
Ms. Mock, I'm just going to pause you for a second. If you could pull the microphone a little bit closer to your mouth, we've gotten a request that it's a little bit hard for some folks to hear some of us as we're talking. So we'll try to. Oh,
It might not work.
it might not.
Does it sound better?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, good. All right, thank you. Yeah, thanks so much.
All right. I believe I was on Section 9. And this is from House File 2029. And this adds specification to the information a licensor must include in a correction order and in a conditional license. So Sections 10 and 11 relate back to that non-disqualifying background study information for a person in the household. Section 12, so jumping to line 102.12. This is from House File 2330. And this provides requirements for child care foster license holders. Child foster care license holders. And these are requirements relating to maintaining the ability to care for the foster child in a safe environment. Section 13 is another governor's proposal. This is the start of some changes to requirements governing the physical infrastructure of child care settings. So let's see, sections 14 through 16 relate back to the requirements governing sleep practices in child care settings. Section 17 is another section relating to individuals in a household with non-disqualifying background information. Section 18, which is on line 113.9. This is a governor's proposal requiring county staff to use the commissioner's electronic licensing checklist for family child care licensing visits. Section 19 has technical changes. Section 20 is another governor's proposal that requires that mandatory reporters are trained on the maltreatment of minors reporting requirements and definitions. Section 21 is from House File 2106, and it clarifies that as part of hiring, a child care center holder or staff person may observe how a prospective employee interacts with children in the licensed facility. Sections 22 through 26 are all proposals related to allowing family child care providers to have continuous licenses, and mostly these are all about not having family child care providers not letting their training expire. Sections 27 through 30 are all changes to requirements governing the physical infrastructure of child care settings. Sections 31 and 32 are related to requiring mandatory reporters to be trained on the maltreatment of minors reporting requirements and definitions. Sections 33 and 34, and I'm on line 122.1. These are back related to Section 3 for having Head Start programs that serve 3 to 5-year-olds not needing to be licensed and instead be certified to accept CCAP. Section 35 is the governor's proposal requiring DHS approval for specified changes in a certified and licensed exempt child care center. Section 36 is a technical change. Sections 37 and 38, these allow a certified licensed exempt child care center to continue to serve a child 14 years or older under specified circumstances. Section 39 is another governor's proposal that modifies requirements governing the administration of medicine in a certified licensed exempt child care center. Section 40 relates to allowing certified licensed exempt child care centers to serve older children. Section 41 is from House File 2029 and directs DHS to expand the definition of education in rules governing licensed childcare centers. And Section 42 is from House File 2106, and this directs DHS to amend rules governing licensed childcare centers to allow a center to hire as an assistant teacher an individual who meets specified criteria that are laid out. And that concludes Article 4.
Thank you, Ms. Mock. So turning to Ms. Pinelli for Article 5. I'll just make sure, any questions on Article 4? Not seeing any, so Ms. Pinelli, thank you. Just make sure to speak into the mic. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Article 5 is the economic assistance article. It begins on page 127. The first grouping of sections that appear throughout this article, sections 1, 3, 5 through 18, 33 through 35, 38, 47, 48, 56 through 62, 80 through 82, and a portion of Section 83 are all related to the repeal of the diversionary work program. The next grouping of sections 2, 66, and 68, are related to the removal of non-recurring income from income calculations for determining eligibility for economic assistance programs, and this was also part of that big MFIP package in Representative Knorr's House File 666. The next grouping of sections 4, 19, 20, 29 through 32, 36, 37, 40, 43, 45, 46, 63, 67, 69 through 79, and a portion of Section 83 are all related to the MFIP 6-month reporting and prospective budgeting proposal that was in Representative Knorr's House File 466. Sections 21 and 22, which appear beginning on page 140, are part of a governor's proposal related to food security for Minnesota families. Sections 23 through 38, 64, and 65 are related to the governor's proposal modifying the FAME program. Section 39, which begins on page 149, is the chair's bill that modifies MFIP citizenship requirements. Section 44, which begins on page 152, is part of the governor's proposal for the MFIP housing assistance inflationary adjustment. Sections 49 through 55 and a portion of Section 83, which begin on page 156, are part of the MFIP sanctions reform in House File 466. And then Section 68, which is on page 172, is from Representative Hansen's bill that modifies unearned income inclusions for economic assistance programs. And that concludes Article 5.
And so remember that article, just because of the different pieces interacting in different ways, we sort of went through in a different way. Are there member questions at this time? And of course, I'm sure we're going to be continuing to look. Okay. I think Article 6 begins on page 182, and Ms. Pinelli, I think that's yours as well, so please
That
proceed.
is correct, Mr. Chair. Article 6 is the homelessness article beginning on the bottom of page 182. Sections 1 through 3 and 5 are all from the governor's proposal addressing homelessness for Minnesota adults, youth, and families. This makes changes to Homeless Youth Act and Safe Harbor by adding that shelter housing section. Sections 4 and 7, which begin on page 185, are from Representative Keeler's Pathway Home Act, which passed the House floor. And then Section 6 on page 185 is from Representative Kozlowski's House File 2008, the Homeless Youth Act, or homeless youth cash stipend pilot project. And that concludes Article 6.
Okay, questions about Article 6, members? Not seeing any, so moving on, I think Ms. Mock is taking us through Articles 7 and 8 at least. Ms. Mock? And Article 7, I guess, begins on page 189.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Article 7 is the miscellaneous article. The first 6 sections and many other sections in this article are established the new Department of Children, Youth, and Families. All of these sections, or most of these sections, were heard in this committee in House File 2320. I will point out some sections that change a little bit later here. Article 7, Section 7, which is on line 194.2. This was from the Great Start Act, and this establishes the Great Start Scholarships Program, and it directs the new department to establish that program starting July 1st, 2024. Section 8 was also in the Great Start Act. It provides that all licensed child care providers will have at least a 1-star rating under Parent Aware unless the provider decides to opt out of the program. And then sections 9 through 19 all relate to the new department. And I'm just going to call your attention to one section that wasn't in the bill when it was heard here, and that's section 18 on line 206.11. And this section directs MMB to provide a transition report to the legislature by March 1st of next year about the work being done to set up the new department. So section 20, which is on line 207.23, was also from the Great Start Act. This directs Minute to develop and implement a plan to modernize the IT systems that support programs that impact children and families. And this is, there's money in the HHS appropriations article that's appropriated for this and transferred to a special revenue account. And then sections 21 and 22 also were in the Great Start Act. And these direct DHS to develop a process for recognizing comparable competencies and also to develop a wage scale and a cost estimation model to be used in the early care and learning field. And then section 23 is just a revisor instruction related to the establishment of the new department.
Okay. Thank you, Article 7. I think you're done with that. Any questions? Okay, moving on to the HHS appropriations article, Article 8 on page 211.
And Mr. Chair, I was not planning to go through that as
right.
Mr. Berg walked through that on the spreadsheet.
Fair enough. Yeah, a good point. And so, members, if you see things you have questions about, let us know. But otherwise, the spreadsheet will have covered this. So, good point. So, I guess we're jumping to the education article on page 226. Ms. Mock.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Article 9 is the education article. Section 1 lists all the appropriations to the Department of Education. And Ms. Beckel went through those when she walked through her spreadsheet. Article 2 is an appropriation to Pelsby, and Ms. Beckel mentioned this also. This is related to House File 2281 and pre-K licensure. Article 3 is from...
Sections 2 and 3, I should say. Yeah.
Thank you for the correction, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Section 3 is from House File 2573. And this establishes a grant program for post-secondary institutions to improve early childhood curricula. Section 4 is from House File 874, and this was also a governor's proposal that modifies how the state appropriation for Head Start can be used by Head Start agencies. And it also designates 10.72% of the total state appropriation to tribal Head Start programs. Section 5 is from House File 1269. This is the governor's proposal to require that a district screening program include virtual developmental screening for any families that wish to have a virtual screening because of health conditions. Section 6 was in the governor's proposal. It was also in House File 993. This increases the amount of state aid paid to school districts for each child who is screened. Section 7 is from House File 2281. It's a slightly modified version of House File 2281, and this requires schools to employ a licensed teacher for preschool programs, and it grandfathers in current preschool teachers. Section 8 is from House File 2565. It's a governor's proposal to establish a Grow Your Own early childhood educator grant program. Section 9 came from House File 862, and it directs the Department of Education to employ 2 full-time equivalent staff to operate or to provide operational support to ECFE programs. Section 10 was a governor's proposal. It deletes a lot of obsolete language and then directs the State Advisory Council on Early Childhood Education and Care to review the work of the Great Start Task Force. Sections 11 through 14 all pertain to early learning scholarships. Some of these proposals are from the governor, and some of them were in House File 1277. I think some of them were also in the Great Start Act. So Section 11 changes eligibility to have for scholarships to having income less than or equal to 47% of state median income. And it also expands the age eligibility for scholarship to include all children under the age of 5. Section 12 adds various priority groups for scholarships and also provides direction to MDE about how to set scholarships amounts. Section 13 deletes the requirement that would have taken effect in 2024 that a program must have 3 or 4 stars to be able to accept 3 or 4 stars under Parent Aware to be able to accept a scholarship. And then Section 14 increases the amount that MDE can use to administer scholarships and also allows MDE to use scholarship money for outreach and distribution of the scholarships. Section 15 is a governor's proposal that provides that a parent of a student with a disability who's not yet enrolled in kindergarten and not open enrolled in a non-resident district may elect a school in the non-resident district where the child is enrolled in a child care program. So basically allowing the child to continue to receive services in the district where they're attending a child care program. Section 16 is related to, or was included in House File 2281. It allows preschool teachers to be added to the teacher bargaining unit. And then Section 17 is technical language for regarding appropriations that members will probably see in every single omnibus bill this year. And I should note that it's the same language is included in Article 8, the HHS appropriations article. And that concludes the bill.
And seriously, thank you to all 5 of you for your work and your help and your support. As members, if it took a while to walk through this, imagine how much time and work they put in to put it together. So really grateful. Are there clarifying questions about the bill or the spreadsheets? Representative Coulter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excuse me. Apologies. My sinuses are draining as a result of a cold I caught from my kids, appropriately enough. Just very quickly on this last article, Section 11, I wonder if excuse me, if nonpartisan staff could clarify sort of what the difference between 47% of state median income and 185% of federal poverty level, what that looks like in terms of dollar figures.
Ms. Mock, Ms. Mock.
Mr. Chair, Representative Coulter, it might just take me a minute to pull that up.
And yeah, please, that's okay. And one thing I'll note, Representative Coulter, 47% is the entry level, income level for CCAP. And so just in terms of, I know we weren't going to get too much into the why and the what, but I'll just note, but I guess this is a what item, just that this does cause the scholarship income eligibility to match CCAP. And members of this committee have noted that there's all kinds of different ways that we're funding, supporting early care and learning and trying to bring those together. But we'll give Ms. Mock a minute. We'll see if there's another question and then have her address that if she's able. Other member questions at all to just clarify? And any question about the process? No, I guess not. Or by the process we're following. Ms. Mock, looks like you're ready. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So they're very close. So 185% of the federal poverty level for a family of 4 is $55,500 a year, and 47% of state median income for a family of 4 is $55,266 a year.
My goodness. Okay, thank you. Which will show the need to have some harmonizing because we've been keeping track of the several dollar difference when it comes to one form versus the other. So I'm trying to harmonize. Other questions anybody has? Okay. So then the plan is, again, members of the public, if you want to testify, you can sign up with Ms. Colburn. The information is printed all kinds of places. Do that by 5 p.m. today. Again, we can take testimony from around the state. We have a big state. We want to make sure people can provide input. And then please, members, if you do have amendments that you're going to be proposing, try to get them to Ms. Mock and to staff immediately, or as quickly as possible, to give them the maximum time to process. So I'm not seeing anything else from anybody, and so we'll see you tomorrow. And with that, the committee is adjourned. Thank you.